Which, can we go back to live?
Yes.
Okay, one sec. They're just doing it now. Okay, we're back live. Sorry about this, councillors. We're back live now.
Okay. Councillor Gray, would you be okay to come in on your question briefly?
Yes, of course. I asked the question on the basis of the trader has obviously written in and made a representation on the basis that not being able to sell these guns will cause a loss of income, which he feels may put him out of business. So looking to what's the right word? Quantify the loss of income to him, I think, is an important part of the decision that we'd be making today. Even a percentage, an idea of the percentage of his income from these guns, 3 or 4 a week doesn't seem like a huge number to be selling. So, trying to get an idea of the numbers involved, I feel would be useful.
Okay, thank you for the clarification there, Councillor Gray. Could I bring Councillor Clifton in and then Councillor Heron?
Yes, thank you. I think, Councillor Catherine, I think that is clear. Mr. Withey, can I just say thank you very much for coming. Perhaps on a sort of similar point, just to give us a sort of complete picture. What else do you sell on your store? Because I mean, I think it's clear from the sale of these guns isn't a sort of big income generator for you. So, what else is it that you're selling and where you get money from?
Yeah. Firstly, you say the item isn't a big seller for me. I've got to tell you, Councillor, not any of my commodities are big sellers at the moment. As I said, I'm going to work and taking 30 to 40 pound a day sometimes. The market is on the floor, and to be honest, I think it's a personal question. I could tell you what that is, but then I'm not taking up, the profit on the toys. I sell toys, I sell blankets, but I'm earning under the minimum wage down that market, and that is why that one commodity helps me out, even if it's just a little bit. And to be honest with you, I think we're all here to say whether I can sell the BB. The issue is whether I can sell the BB guns or not. Not the issue of how much I make. I mean, it's like asking me how much you make. It's a very personal question. I'll answer your question because it's very little, as the lady said, and I said 3-4 guns a week. But them 3-4 guns make up of ever dwindling income. So I might sell a few toys on a couple of blankets, but it's still a very, very low income. It's a very low income.
Okay, well, thank you. It's toys and blankets you sell. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Heron, and then I think we'll move to the debate if anyone else wishes to speak at that point.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Withey, I think you're under a misapprehension about the council not wanting the market, and there was an incident. Many years ago, the council actually provided all stalls in a sort of a traditional sort of branding to make the stalls more attractive, more uniform, and lo and behold, the stall holders sold them all on eBay. And so to say we haven't done anything is wrong. I did read somewhere that you claim that the council, or the traders claimed, that the council actually painted the facade of the white building. That also isn't true. When we did this Sutton Northern Gateway project, as it was, we invited the traders to come along with residents, council officers. We did it through the local committee. Not one single trader came forward to actually work with us. And we tried several attempts. And when we were doing the consultation down there, and we brought things down there, we did ask for your cooperation, your involvement, but nobody took that up. And we asked so many times of traders that we were doing that. So I think it's a bit unfair to say that the council's never tried to do anything with the market. And there will be more ongoing conversations that we need to have, and we would benefit from the inclusion of stall holders. So I hope you ask your colleagues to actually get involved when this happens.
Of course I would. Going back to you say that all the stalls were sold on eBay. That's the first I've heard of it. To be honest with you, when the stalls were given to us, I think there was a lot more traders. We've got about 6 traders down there now, and probably 4 of them are new traders. So they wouldn't have had the new stalls that you were given all them many years ago. So that's the kind of that wouldn't have applied to them. The thing is, 12 years ago, we asked for, well, more than 12 years ago actually, when we first went out into the high street, we asked for tie downs and we asked for a toilet, which we didn't get the toilet and we didn't get the tie downs. I've lost countless days down on the market through bad weather, through rain and wind. It's like a wind tunnel, obviously, where the market's situated, the way it's placed out. And we've lost countless days through bad weather. We still pay the rent, even though we can't work. The thing is, we asked for tie downs, which would have kept. When wind gets up, it's like water gets into anything. Wind is hard to keep the stall down. But without tie downs, we couldn't work. We couldn't work. We asked for a toilet, which never came. We've asked for things and we've never got them. You say that we were invited to this meeting when this refurb. Was it true that you had £500,000 to use on the bottom end of the high street to improve the market?
It was for the whole of the high street, the bottom end of the high street, just not the market. It was all the shops.
We are slightly straying here. Could we try to keep this as focused on the report if we could? Is that okay?
Yeah. And the question I wanted to ask was about the cost of the BB guns. I didn't want to know the profit. I just wanted to know the costs. The costs,
as I said, range from £5 to around £50. That's what that's what I sell them at.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Could I bring Councillor McDermott Hill in briefly? I'm just wanting to the point on the deferral here. As far as I'm aware, at least, the purpose of having Mr. Withy here today, and we're very, very grateful for the time that he's giving up. Yeah, is so that he can give his views, and his views can be heard by us as a committee before we make a decision. I would hope that he would agree that that is taking place. It's not, you don't need to answer that, but as far as I'm aware, we are fine to continue, at least in principle, that we are fine to continue. And on that point, could I bring Councillor McDermott Hill in?
Thank you, Chair. I've got it refers to the letter that's been written in by Mr. Withy, and thank you, Mr. Withy, for giving your time and for us to hear what you've got to say about it. This letter, it refers to the persecuted trader. Now, we've gathered that you sell BB guns in the market, but I'm slightly confused that there's a reference to, or what seems to be, another trader who sells BB guns. So are you the only person who sells BB guns down there, or is there another trader?
There's another trader. There is another trader that sells. He doesn't sell them. He sells the handheld. He doesn't sell. I sell kind of bigger guns. He only sells a couple of handheld. But as again, he's myself and him are the longest serving traders. I think we've been down there for 25 years plus, with no, we've never had any problems. And as I said, the police have been on the stall, etc. Yeah.
Okay, and just one very quick follow-up question. You may not be able to answer it. Does he roughly sell the, is his uptake on the BB gun side of things roughly the same as yours?
Of course, yes. I can't say this importantly enough. The market, as all retail is going through the toughest times they've ever had, and after this COVID, it's going to be even worse. There's going to be millions of people unemployed through this. And the income that we're generating, all the traders, it's not like people with different commodities are earning any money down there. We are suffering. We're not earning any money. We are really struggling. As I said, I'm earning less than the minimum wage at the moment, but because it's my own business, I want to keep it my own business, and that's why I'm just fighting for this. You understand? It's, it might have been good in the old days, but the bottom has fell out, and we really are struggling, and that's why you've only got 4 or 5 traders down there at all times. Hundreds have come and gone. The shops are closing down there. The RBS bank closed, the betting shop closed, Greg closed, the project closed. It's becoming like, I'm waiting for a straw ball to come through the down the bottom, because the shops are closing everywhere. Down the bottom on the right hand side, there's no shops open whatsoever. I hear that Argos is going to go within a year, so that's going to be closed down. So we're going to be surrounded by closed shops, and it's just, it's hard. It's hard. That's all I can say.
Okay. Does anybody, I don't think anybody else has indicated they would like to speak. So could I just?
Sorry. Can I just say one more?
Go ahead.
One more thing. Sorry. Yeah. Going back to the survey, and how this was written, it said and it said firearms. As I said in my earlier statement, it was very misleading and inaccurate, and it's not the truth. It's not, the wording wasn't right whatsoever. So people have voted on something that is incorrect. That's what I'd like to say.
Okay. So before we move to the debate in which members will be invited to speak further, could I just thank you, Mr. Withy, for taking the time that you have to bear with us through all of this, and to give us your views on this. It's really important that your views are heard and are taken into account.
No, thank you for all listening to me. And as I said, look, this hasn't got anything to do with the toy guns, but if you should bring us more into the fray, because at the end of the day, we work down there, so we might be able to tell you what works and what doesn't work. It's if you're a carpenter, I wouldn't come and tell you how to build a wardrobe, and as such, and just with loads of respect to you all, we work down there day in, day out, so we know what could work and what couldn't work. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think anything we do now down there will work, because the retail is really on the floor. But as I said, I'd like to thank you for bringing me on the meeting.
Okay, you're more than welcome to stay for the general debate. I know we sort of jumped the gun and had a bit of it earlier on. You're welcome to stay and to listen. Although if there isn't anything further, just so that you're aware that you won't be able to speak further. Is that okay?
Right. Okay. Well, I'll pull out now then, if I can't say anything else, that'll just probably wind me up. So, but anyway, you all have a good day. Yeah. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Withy.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you. Bye bye. Thanks.
Okay. Does any other member want to come in at this stage? We've had the representation. We've had a full-on debate earlier on. Have the points that members want to make been made before, or are they new points that people want to bring in at this stage? Councillor Shields.
Right. Okay. First of all, I'd like to lodge my great concern at how we're ploughing ahead with this, and the guy hasn't even had an agenda. He's not having his fair treatment, and I would like to ask the legal side through the debate process, or just as a straight question. If we are looked at as an authority, I'm talking about the process, not BB guns. I'm not affectionate for them. I don't care. The point is, we are a licensing committee who have been allowed to make decisions in a quasi-judicial fashion. And this chair is a disaster of a meeting. It is a disaster. If Mr. Withy takes us to the Magistrates' Court, I am sure that we will not be looked at favourably for running such a shambolic meeting. You need to defer this and get this right. And I think if Mr. Withy was, Mr. Barry Lewis said, Councillor Lewis said, what are these things? Well, I don't particularly know myself. I know they've got little yellow plastic pellets that come out of them. How hard are they? How dangerous are they? I don't know that either. And I think, in fairness, no one on the committee really does. So we're making a decision blind in a shambolic fashion without due process given to the well, we'll call him the applicant, the trader. Well, this is going nowhere. Why don't you just close it down now and defer it and ask Mr. Whitley to come and display and show us exactly what he's talking about? That's it.
Could David, would you wish to come in, or could you advise further?
Yeah, I can. Unfortunately, we don't have a legal advisor with us today, but my
sorry. This is a quasi-judicial meeting, and we don't have a legal advisor. What on earth is going on?
We don't have a legal advisor with us today, but my understanding is this: that if you have posted something, the magistrates' rules say that if you've posted something, first-class post, it's deemed served within 48 hours. So I think the fact that an agenda was posted on Tuesday means we can deem it was served. Even in the current situation. In terms of Mr. Withy, he's had an opportunity to listen to the report. It was verbally presented by myself. He's had an opportunity to have his say, have questions asked of him, and to answer those questions. So I think he's had a fair opportunity. Now, of course, that's not legal advice. That's just my opinion as a professional officer. That he has had that opportunity today. So I hope that helps somehow.
Okay, Councillor Crosby, and then Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I've been looking up while we've been going on through this meeting, and even before this, back, as I said, when the petition came in regarding trying to get these banned because of the petition that came in with over 600 signatures on it. We did look up, so I do know what these guns are, and the gentleman himself has said that he sells them from £5 to £50. Now, £50 are the high velocity ones, and BB means ball bearing gun. That's what it means. It's a ball bearing gun. Okay, so he says that adults are buying them. Yes, adults are buying them for the children, unfortunately. So I'm sorry, there have been 4 deaths a year through BB guns. There have been 3,560, which is 80% over the last 26 years of injury with these guns. 3,500 over the last 26 years. And they've mainly been at the head, eyes, and it's 80% of injuries on children with these guns are caused through the gun. So to say we will be failing, and to be selling 3 guns a week, I'm sorry, that is not. I used to be a market trader. You don't rely on one item.
You get your money from every item you sell. It's not the only item he sells. I'm sorry, but as far as I'm concerned, for the safety of our people living in this borough, these need to be banned, whether he's got them or anyone else has got them. That's all I've got to say.
Okay. Councillor Allen, could I bring you in a second? Could I just ask for some clarification from officers on a point was made in the representations on the rationale of including BB guns under the firearms section. Could you perhaps enlighten? It might serve to enlighten the committee as to the rationale behind that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, they are deemed a replica firearm. Whilst they can, some are sold as toys. The point is that they're deemed as a replica firearm, or they can be deemed as a replica firearm. So, which is why we would classify them under this special consideration item.
And that is standard across most licensing authorities, I assume.
In terms of replica firearms being a prohibited or a restricted item, yes, certainly Hammersmith and Fulham, Merton, Westminster all have that as a condition of their street trading. Okay, and in the consultation that was done in the report to the committee in February, 93% of those who responded were in favour of firearms, including replica firearms, being included in any prohibited list. I want to just make that clear to members before we sort of proceed any further. Councillor Allen, did you want to?
Very, very quickly. I'm really sorry. I did mean to say that, actually, that when we looked at it, they are classed as a firearm or a replica firearm, not a toy.
Yeah. Councillor Allen, you wanted to come in?
Oh, yes, it's Councillor Martina Allen, actually. It was on the point that David said. It was on the point that David said about the post, and it was posted out on Tuesday. We had a little conversation about this before the meeting started, because today I've actually had to go to the sorting office in Grove Road and pick up a week's post, because nothing from last Monday was received where I live in Sutton. No post was received, and their excuse was they didn't have postmen. So Mr. Whitney, quite perhaps if he lives in a similar area to me, perhaps he never received any post. The other thing I wanted to say is, as regards the BB guns, I'm not a fan of them, but I have got now a 22-year-old son, and he did go through the BB gun phase, and we did buy them for him because he was desperate and all his friends had them. And the one thing you have to do is they have to be used under supervision. We never had any problems. His friends came round, they wore protective gear, they put on glasses and what have you, but it's like anything. They are, they are one item, I would say, classed as a toy, but they really do have to be supervised. I mean, I wouldn't let a baby swim in a paddling pool on its own. You've got to watch them. But I'd still buy a paddling pool and people still sell them. They've just got to be controlled. So, I don't know. I'm not a fan of them, but at the same time, they're quite legally sold. That's all I have to say.
Okay, could I bring in at that point Councillor Clifton? You wish to speak.
I just wanted to ask, Chair, you said that we would have a debate.
Oh dear. I think Richard has gone. There he is. Sorry, Richard, you dropped out there for a second. You're muted. Could you repeat that and unmute yourself, please?
Yes, I think I did accidentally leave the meeting there. Which I was trying to get the. I was just trying to get the paper. Now, can be clear. You said maybe this is the sort of civil servant in me saying, what exactly are we talking about? You did say we'd have a debate. So I always go back and say, look at the papers before us. So the paper says that proposes an amendment to the street trading policy to introduce this commodities list. which includes a special consideration, which says following commodities were given a special consideration before holders of street licenses are licensed to trade. And then there's a short list which includes explosives, live animals, firearms, including replicas and ammunition. So is the and it's been consulted on. There's only one representation made about one highly specific item: ball-bearing guns. So is the proposal that this will be adopted by the committee, but we will amend that special consideration commodities. So where it says firearms, including replicas and ammunition, it would say firearms, including replicas and ammunition, except ball-bearing guns. And Conservative councillors are quite happy that we can say that Conservative councillors were in favour of that ball-bearing guns should be sold at market stalls in the London Borough of Sutton. I'm a bit surprised at that. But perhaps you could just clarify, Chair, exactly what is the proposition that we are debating, and is that the proposition that we would amend that list to say firearms and ammunition, excluding ball-bearing guns, which then people can sell. Okay.
So the recommendations that we're debating, and we will eventually move to a vote on, are to note the findings of the consultation, of our intention to introduce the commodities list, including restricted commodities, to the street trading policy, subject to any amendments arising from the consideration of those responses, to make a resolution in accordance with the London Local Authorities Act to introduce the commodities list, including restricted commodities, as set out in Appendix A. So as is, we would be looking to introduce that restricted list as per the recommendations, unless members wished to amend otherwise. Does that clarify in some way, or has that made that worse?
Thank you very much, Chair. I think that does clarify it. So it would be open then to those councillors who are in favour of the sale of ball-bearing guns to propose the amendment of that list to specifically say that ball-bearing guns can be sold. Okay, thank you very much. That's clear.
Yes, that is open to members at present. Yes, Councillor Shields, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, am I on? Yes, I think so. No, Richard, it's not that Conservative councillors, I say it is not that Conservative councillors want ball-bearing guns sold. It is very important that a proper process is put in place for whatever is sold. Now, I can see your way of making a political point out of this, but ultimately, this quasi-judicial meeting needs to be compliant with the law, and our concerns is that this authority is not complying by the law. Whether we do or do not sell, the fact that we don't want BB guns available, I concur. This must not be misconstrued as Conservatives appropriating the BB guns. The law of the land is the law of the land, and with the powers given to us by the Magistrates' Court, I am asking quite fairly how this authority, under Lib Dem control, seeks to usurp the law of the land. Now, there is the Local Authorities Act, and it hasn't been challenged, but I'm just trying to make sure that everyone understands that the sale of whatever it is that is legal is exactly that. I seem to remember Tom Brake being very favour of the legal highs, or was he against it? I can't remember. He changes his mind so often. So if it's legal, it's legal. If it's not, it's not. And that's all we're doing as, I think, as not as Conservatives, as individuals, is asking the question, is it something that can be challenged in the Magistrates' Court? A little bit, in fact, very much like planning. If we do not comply by the planning rules, then they take it to Bristol Planning Inspectorate and get it overturned, despite whether we do or don't want something built. So I'm just to clarify and to make absolutely sure that you, Richard, understand the point that is being made and is not misconstrued for political gain by yourself and your party. I'm out.
Okay. would David or Nick be willing to respond to parts of that? I'm aware you can't respond to most of it, but yeah.
Yes, Councillor, I'd perhaps refer you to paragraph 6.6 of the committee report, which says that any person aggrieved by resolution of this committee or any standard condition or anything else that has been put on the unrestricted items list can appeal to the Magistrates' Court.
Yes, okay. And that is a fairly standard part of the process. Councillor Bartolucci wished to speak. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. Thank you, Chair. I always seem to follow Councillor Shields in a very timely fashion, in a weird way. You know, the first thing, picking up on the planning comment about Bristol, well, I mean, allegedly, I think the MP, you know, Mr. Jendrick will be probably having to answer his questions soon about how things are dealt with the supposed independent planning inspectorate and the powers that be. So I'm not sure that's particularly helpful as a comment. The other question is that, which is actually to officers, to David and Nick. There was a comment made about the ability for the council to license over the market traders over these kind of products, and versus perhaps other establishments, perhaps shops that might sell them. I'm not aware of any that will sell them. And obviously I would like to get a grasp perhaps as to what the licensing rules are and where they lie within the local authority remit. I mean, my assumption is that when it comes to market trading, it lies fully within the authority of the local, well, of the local authority. Whereas when it comes to the more general classification of these items sold in shops, that might be a more disparate way of identifying them and classifying them, in which case perhaps the route forward is to allow members of parliament to take the fight forward for residents who are rather displeased or unhappy about these items being sold. I appreciate people buy them. I appreciate that Mr. Withy came on. And to be fair to him, I've got a lot of sympathy, and of course I want the market to sustain itself, and I want him to be successful. There are a lot of nuances, there are a lot of issues. I think Councillor Shields' ability to render an argument down to its lowest common denominator doesn't really help frequently. There are plenty of attempts and desires to get the market going. Obviously, there are a number of different items that could be sold in a very similar fashion. For example, off the top of my head, I'm thinking of the Nerf gun, which is a foam-based, rubber-based item. Picking up on Councillor Gray's comments about the number of items, I think that was a key question, and then followed up by Councillor Crosby about the number of items actually being sold and whether this was a deal breaker. It didn't sound like it was. And it's not about identifying one individual out. Of course not. Because despite Councillor Shields' protestations, we actually work very hard to try and bring, despite the challenges, pre-COVID and post-COVID, pre-technology, post-technology, whatever you want to call it, we're working very hard, like all high streets are, to try and bring that footfall down to the high street, bring it down, to increase the footfall down to the high street, and obviously any assistance from the opposition. And I know there have been many members, Councillor Aaron being one of them, who's I know been very forthcoming in his views, and Councillor Hicks as well has frequently commented on HEB about such issues. So I look forward to that kind of engagement. I don't think we ought to be you know, this is an important issue, but I think, unfortunately, when we talk about the greater, if you will, the greater good versus an individual's desire to continue a particular format or particular way of living, then I appreciate there's going to be conflicts. But, you know, as councillors, we're always looking not to sit on the fence, not to create a hash job of any argument, is to look out for the greater good. And you know, I appreciate the licensing committee's time to hear me out.
Yes. Could I just bring you back to the question you were asking of officers there, David? Would you like that answered now, or what was the question?
Well, yeah, sorry. Thank you, Chair. You're far more decisive than I am. I just ramble. But no, it was very much the question of, you know, I appreciate that there's, you know, we're here sat on licensing. We're talking about the marketplace. But then obviously, I think it was Councillor Shields that made, you know, to be perfectly honest, a very valid comment about, well, what about other shops? And of course, I don't feel, I mean, I could be preempting this, but I don't feel we have much ability in stepping in those areas. So I'm wondering whether there is a conflict between local authority licensing and a kind of more broader central government guidance on licensing when it comes to these other outlets. And of course, the conflicts are there. And I just would like to perhaps expand on that, because obviously I don't want Mr. Whitty to be put out, but equally, you know, I think we have an issue that we want to consider. And as a local authority, if our remit is the market area, then, you know, we look at that. If we can't go into another shop, and if we can't go into, you know, the kind of chains or regular shops to you know, if we haven't got the powers there.
Is it fair to say your question is sort of where is the boundary?
Yes.
Okay, could officers enlighten us perhaps? Where is the boundary between sort of what this committee is empowered to do and things really beyond our control?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Bartos, you almost answered his own question effectively there by saying what I was going to say, and that is, street trading is a way of licensing the use of our land, the council's land as a highway authority. So a street trading license gives you permission to use our land to sell things, and therefore we are perfectly within our rights, and the legislation allows us to restrict and control what is sold where, when, and what items are sold. So that's where we're at. In terms of shops and what they sell, we have less control over. They sell what they wish to sell when they're in the shops, and of course there are laws that prevent them from selling certain things, and there are also laws that prevent them from selling age-restricted products to people under age, for example. But aside from that, we don't have as much control over what shops sell as we do on street traders are able to sell, simply because, you know, we are giving consent to a street trader, and therefore it's only right that we are able to do so in whichever way suits us as the local authority. I hope that helps.
Yes, that's very helpful, I think. Councillor Lewis, you wanted to come in, and then Councillor McDermott Hill.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to understand the wording. The council has determined that the following commodities will be given special consideration before holders of street trading licenses, etc., are licensed to trade. Does that mean that we are able to make exceptions with that special consideration commodities list? And if we are, who is it who makes the exception?
That is a pretty good question. Mr. Kingstone, would you want to come in?
Yes, of course. So generally what we mean by this is that they're restricted commodities, so they're not normally permitted to be sold. However, someone could make a request to us to sell those items. Take alcohol for an example, and that's on the list of restricted commodities. Normally, would normally allow that to be sold, but perhaps if there was a Christmas market that came to us and said one of the biggest offerings we've got is the the Bavarian style mulled wine and beer stall, can we have a special consideration to sell for that period? So that's how it would be managed. There's nothing to prevent anybody coming to us and saying, I want to have a market license and I'd like special consideration to sell this item, which may be on the list of restricted commodities. If they make that, then it would come before committee to make a decision as to whether that would be granted as part of the granting of a street trading license or renewal of a street trading license, for example.
Okay, thank you. So it would, in theory, be possible. We can agree 99% of what's on the list, and it may be necessary to have a further smaller committee where the ball bearing question can be gone into in more detail, if that's what's necessary.
I think if that formed part of somebody's application, then yes, we could bring that before a subcommittee.
Yes. So it would go the way that the process would work, if I'm understanding you correctly there, David, as is standard for anyone applying for a license, if there is a representation against it, it would therefore come to a panel, and we could judge at that stage whether to give them special consideration to sell items that are otherwise on the restricted list. So it isn't a blanket no to everything, or a blanket no in all circumstances, but it is saying quite clearly that we need to give particular consideration to these items. It's not saying no and forever. No, it is simply saying we need to look at that in more detail on a case-by-case basis. Is that a fair reading of what we are approving?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Councillor McDermott Hill, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I don't actually have a. I'm not sure what part of the committee we're on now. Is this still a debate, or are we sort of asking questions of officers? Because I don't really have a question as such. It's just more a sort of a general observation on how the meeting has played out so far. I mean, to be quite frank, at the sort of the beginning of this, and before I heard from the trader, I was sort of minded to I was half minded to abstain because I didn't feel that we had maybe the exact amount of information that designed a sort of a fully informed position to take on it. But actually, I am now satisfied that I've got the information available to make a decision on this. So I will be voting for the recommendation based on what we've heard throughout the period of this committee. And yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you there, Councillor McDermott Hill. It should be said, I would suggest that the process of this item was exactly that, so that through the discussion and the debate that has happened, members can form their own view before we move to a recommendation. That's the purpose of really the way that has been structured. I know Councillor Shields wanted to come in, and then I think we will move to the recommendations after that.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor McDermott Hill is absolutely spot on the money. And I'd like to thank Barry Lewis as well. He's read through the paper. We've all read the paper, but in a way, perhaps we all look at it slightly different angles. That's life, I guess. But Mr. Barry Lewis has identified the fact that there is a secondary form to apply, the secondary method of application. And of course, as I've harped on many times, and my concerns are still withstand my concerns, there is the magistrates' court for the street vendor should he feel so aggrieved. So with that in mind, and I can't believe I'm saying this debate has actually worked to alter perspectives. There's actually a compliment coming here, Chair. It's worked to alter perspectives. perspectives. I would agree with Councillor McDermott Hill, and I'm sure many others, that we can go forward with a recommendation on the basis of the fullness of the debate, although it's been a bit like watching a Thunderbirds movie a bit.
I thought that compliment would have a backhand to it.
No backhand intended. Oh, unfair.
Fair enough. With that gracious comment, is it fair to say that the recommendations are agreed and we don't need a roll call vote? I'm hoping you'll indicate in the chat.
Yes, no.
Yes. Okay. In which case, good. So recommendations, I will get the numbers up here. Just for the record, recommendations 2.1 and 2.2 are agreed. Thank you all. Brilliant. Okay. So those are firstly to note the findings of the consultation and the public notice, and subject to any amendments, make a resolution in accordance with section 27 of the London Local Authorities Act to introduce a commodities list, including restricted commodities as set out in Appendix A. So that's agreed there. Thank you all. Moving forward to urgent items, I do want to state now for the record that I would quite like to give for officers to give members a verbal update on the recent announcements from government regarding licensing changes, and that will happen just after this meeting. It isn't an urgent item, as there isn't something for decision, but I just want that stated on the record that members would like to be kept aware of that will be happening. Thank you all for bearing with me. It's my first meeting chairing this committee. With all of the technical issues that have happened, I didn't quite suspect we would be having a virtual meeting like this. But I believe